think everybody's muted. Perfect. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alexis Conley, Bridgewater class of 99 and MBA 14, and I am the Assistant Director of the Alumni Relations Department. And I would like to welcome you and wish you all a great afternoon. And thank you all for joining us for the third installment of our virtual Aluminar series, Preparing for the 2020 Elections, a discussion with Dr. Michael Kryzanek. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items that I'd like to address to make this the best Zoom experience for everyone involved. First and foremost, I must mention that this presentation will be recorded for future use. In the top right corner, you can see that there are two views, full screen and speaker view. Feel free to choose the view that is best for you. Please keep your own screen muted and with the video off at all times as not to distract from the presentation. Q&A will take place immediately following the talk. Please feel free to type in questions at any time throughout the presentation using the chat feature on the bottom toolbar. Now that housekeeping is all set, I'd like to introduce you to our guest host for today's Aluminar. Rob Bradley is the head of Bridge Research at State Street Associates, a team that bridges the gap between empirical finance research and practice. He is co-chair of the Bridgewater State University Employee Network at State Street and is on the board of State Street's Numerates Network. He is also a part-time faculty member at Boston College and Northeastern University. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Bridgewater State University, class of 2012, where he also majored in English, a master's degree in applied economics from Northeastern University, class of 2014, and is a candidate for his PhD in applied economics at Northeastern, class of 2020. Rob lives in Bridgewater with his wife and 3 sons, one of whom has his first day of kindergarten today. So let me pass it along to Rob.
Thank you, Alexis. Yes, big day today. My oldest it's his first day of kindergarten. So he's actually mid-school while we're also mid-talk today. But I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us. Thanks for coming back. If this isn't your first Aluminar, the talk today could not be more timely, more important. And I'm really looking forward to hearing Dr. Kryzanek's take on the election. But before we get into his talk, I just want to introduce Dr. Kryzanek for those of you who do not know him. Michael Kryzanek is Professor Emeritus of Political Science. During his years in the Political Science Department, he was the longest serving chairperson and helped launch the Master Public Administration program. Dr. Kryzanek is formerly the Executive Director of the Minnick Center for International Engagement at Bridgewater State, with responsibility for expanding the university's global presence. From 2016 to 2019, Dr. Kryzanek was the Academic Director in the Public Management Institute for the U.S. Department's Young African Leaders Initiative that brought 25 fellows to campus as Mandela Fellows. Currently, Dr. Kryzanek is participating in Bridgewater State Senior College, where he teaches courses on American politics and government. Dr. Kryzanek received his PhD from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in 1975. He's the author of 8 books on U.S. foreign policy, American government, and comparative politics. His latest book, written with his doctor, Dr. Ann Carruth, is 25 Issues That Shape American Politics, Debates, Differences, and Divisions. Dr. Kryzanek is the board chair of Father Bill's in Mainspring, the largest homeless organization on the South Shore, and vice president of the Rotary Club of the Bridgewaters. He lives in Whitman with his wife, Carol. They have 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren. And so without further ado, I want to turn it over to you, Dr. Kryzanek, for your presentation in preparation for the upcoming presidential election. Take it away.
Mike, can you hear us? You're muted and we don't have any video of you.
Okay.
All right, we're all set. You can take it away, Mike.
Okay, fine. Well, it's wonderful to be here with you all today on this beautiful day in Massachusetts, and also at a time of a great importance for our country. Many people have said this will be the most consequential election, the presidential election of 2020, that we've had in many years, perhaps in the history of our nation. Not only will the American people have to choose a president, but they will also be choosing 1/3 of the Senate, all the members of the House of Representatives, and a number of governors. But what's at the heart of this election, I think it's fair to say, and I think many people would agree, is that there are many differences between the two presidential candidates and the Democrats and Republicans and Americans in general over the quality of our democracy and the way we govern ourselves, the rule of law, individual rights, established norms of behavior by our political leaders, and visions of the future that are at stake here. So it's not exaggeration to state that the outcome of the election will have a profound short-term and likely long-term effect on our nation and on our individual lives, which is what many people, I think, are concerned about as they make their decisions about who to vote for at the local, state, and certainly at the national level. Before we begin, let me give you a little bit of a background here where we are in terms of the people running for office. Of course, I think we all know that it's President Trump versus Joe Biden, but there are 33 plus 2 Senate elections. Usually every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate is up for election, but this time there are 2 special elections, one in Arizona to fulfill the term that was expired by John McCain, and one in Georgia to fill the expired position of Senator Isaacson, who passed away as well, as did John McCain. So we have 35 Senate seats up. The Senate is divided currently between Democrats and Republicans, Republicans having 53 seats, the Democrats having 47. 2 of that 47 are defined as independents, but they almost exclusively caucus or link up with the Democratic side. We have 435 members of the House who are all up for re-election for 2 years. We have 7 governors, 7 Republicans and 4 Democrats, a total of 11 individuals running for governorships in their state. So when we get to the so-called magic number of 270 electoral votes, it is the addition of 435 US reps, 100 senators, and 3 electoral votes from the District of Columbia. And that number totals 538 divided by 2 with a majority gets the number of 270 that we'll be talking about, which would link up the, which would establish who is the President of the United States for the next 4 years. But there's a lot of steps along the way that we're going to have to take a look at in order to get to that, that not only that magic number of 270, but also to determine who has indeed won the election. Just again, further background, we'll take a look very quickly at the numbers from 2016. Donald Trump got 304 electoral votes, 304 electoral votes. Hillary Clinton, 227. But Hillary Clinton, by almost 3 million votes, won the so-called popular vote. But in our system of governance, it is the Electoral College that is driving the victor for the next 4 years. And as I say, 304 for Donald Trump, 227 for Hillary Clinton. Excuse me. But it's kind of interesting to take a look at this election in 2016 because Donald Trump won Michigan by only around 11,800 votes. He won Wisconsin by some 27,000 votes, and he won Pennsylvania by 68,000 votes. So there was a very, very narrow margin that brought the victory to Donald Trump. And I think you know that all you need is one more vote than your opponent, and you get all of those electoral votes. So those 3 states, as we'll see a little bit later, I think will be very, very important in terms of whether Donald Trump is able to get them this time again, and whether the margin of victory is narrow, as it was very, very narrow in 2016. Now, as we move forward here in terms of election choice and voter choice, which is, of course, the critical ingredient in any national elections, is that there are some new elements that are coming to the forefront here with regard to the race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. We'll take a look at some of the important issues in a second, but what's also important is to see that really for the first time in modern electoral politics, some of these other behavioral characteristics or personal characteristics seem to be driving the voter choice, such as the quality of leadership that we see with both individuals, their competency, their ability to bring to the office an understanding of issues and governance, their truthfulness, to what extent are they presenting the facts adequately and accurately, I should say, to the American people, to the American voters. And lastly, there is this issue of health and mental acuity. I think you may know Donald Trump is 74, Joe Biden is 77. There has been a good deal of discussion about both of their health issues, age issues, and mental acuity issues. We're not going to get into that today because that's not my job. I'm a political scientist, not a medical person or a psychiatrist, but certainly that's part of it as well. Often in elections, what drives the vote is how the American people come down in terms of their views on a series of important issues. The Pew Research Survey, which was conducted at in early August, we haven't had one since then, listed these as the very most important issues and ranked them that the American people are concerned with at the time. Number one, and not surprisingly, is the economy in all its various characteristics, whether it's the recession we're in, whether it's unemployment, whether it's the stock market, whether it's the pre-pandemic economy. The economy remains, and pocketbook issues remain, a critical ingredient in voter choice. Secondly is healthcare. The United States spends the largest percentage of its gross domestic product, about 17%, on healthcare. And this has created an enormous problem for many, many people, over 20 million people who currently do not have insurance or are incomplete in terms of their insurance coverage. The bill passed by the Congress during the Obama administration, Obamacare, was designed to address that, but it has not completely achieved that goal. In fact, the Republicans, it's fair to say, are working to try to bring that legislation down. Thirdly is Supreme Court appointments, which is kind of a surprise. You never see this rise to number 3 in the list, but many people realize that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 87, going on 88. Justice Breyer is 82. Both of them are in the liberal wing. Already President Trump has presented a list of who he would appoint should both of those individuals or one of those individuals retire. And I think it's fair to say that President Trump is looking for a conservative to replace one of those two if that does come about. Excuse me. Fourth is the coronavirus, COVID-19. Again, not surprising, the number of deaths that have occurred, the number of hospitalizations, and the hot spots in our country, but also more importantly, the response that the federal government and President Trump brought to this crisis certainly will be part of a decision-making on the part of the voters. Fifth is violent crime, particularly the protests in major cities like Portland, Oregon, whether it's peaceful protest or violent protest, and how the American people think about this kind of response to African Americans and the police. Foreign policy is usually somewhere in this mix, but right now it's further down the list. but certainly the relations with Russia, with China, with the Middle East. The Trump administration just recently signed an agreement to resume, Israel resume relations with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. And the questions of Iraq, Afghanistan, and Iran also are part of that mix. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean that these will be critical ingredients in the voter choice, but they certainly are out there and cannot be ignored. And lastly, I should mention North Korea as well. Gun policy is there as well, the Second Amendment and the view of many Americans of their right to purchase and own guns, and the impact that those guns sometimes have and many times have on mass killings, suicides, and the question of what kind of weapons should people be permitted to own, and particularly the so-called AR-15, the military-style weapons. Race and ethnic inequality is also present. In other words, the glaring gap between African Americans and white upper class Americans, the differences between Hispanic Americans and upper class Americans, white Americans, is a growing concern. The United States has the highest level of what is often called income inequality, and as a result of that, creating an enormous gap between the very wealthy and those who are at the very bottom of the economic scale. Immigration seems to be around forever and ever in our country, in terms of we have about 11 or 12 million illegal immigrants right now. We have the push of some migrants coming from Central America and Mexico. We have the issue of the wall that is currently being built and modernized and deepened. And we also have the so-called dreamers, young people who came here with illegal parents when they were 2, 3, 1, just babies, and now are in their 20s and want to stay here because they had no decision of their own on how to whether they should come to the United States. And then going to the bottom here, so to speak, is income inequality. In other words, the general, not ethnic or racial, but the general separation between some Americans, no matter what their racial or ethnic background is, and the upper class. This income inequality we saw very, I think, sadly when the COVID came out, and you saw long lines, mile-long lines of people waiting for food. You see people being concerned about not getting the stimulus that they originally received. That's gone by the wayside, and so this is creating in the minds of many people a tremendous gap in our society. Second to the last is climate change, which never really rises to the very top 3 or so, but maybe the forest fires and the hurricanes that may be coming across our, well, one right now, but coming across our country may move that forward. But certainly climate change is an issue that Americans are thinking about and may be moving further up the list of issues. And lastly is abortion. Abortion continues to divide this country and create problems for political leaders in terms of their positions. Evangelicals and the Catholic Church leaders are clearly pro-life, and the Democratic side, Biden and Harris, are certainly pro-choice. And so this is creating an issue that Donald Trump and others may use in the campaign. Again, a divisive issue. Okay, let's talk about some of the ingredients that people are thinking about when it comes to voting for the incumbent, in this case Donald Trump, or the challenger Joe Biden. Often, and I'll just go through this real quickly, Donald Trump will clearly in upcoming debates talk about his accomplishments, keeping his promises to the American people, achieving a strong economy before the pandemic, and generally being pro-business. Failures, no presidential incumbent talks about their failures, but certainly that may be in the minds of some people as they make a judgment of whether Donald Trump handled the COVID crisis adequately, whether it was indeed a failure. So it's not so much what the president incumbent says, but how people perceive his his work on a particular public policy issue. And then generally the general performance. How has the individual performed in office? Has he led? Has he developed a good rapport with the American people? Has he been a true decision maker in the sense of making good and wise decisions? And lastly, how does this incumbent view the future of the country? Where are we headed, in the right direction or the wrong direction? Right now, just to give you a little bit of a data spot here, 65% of Americans in public opinion polls have said we're on the wrong track as a nation, in the wrong direction. So I think this will be something that both candidates will have to face. Certainly Donald Trump, is he putting us on the right track? And Joe Biden, of course, questioning whether we are headed in a very, very wrong direction. On the other side, the challenger usually has a more problematic chore here, and that is to try to unseat an incumbent who often has the advantage of office and the trappings of the office. But certainly Joe Biden and anyone who's running as a challenger, they will attack the record and the performance of the candidate. They will attack their behavior. In this case, kind of the truthfulness and the tweets of Donald Trump, I think, will likely come up. Their values, what do they hold dear? And are those democratic values? Are there moral values? And then the mode of operation. How does the individual perform in office? How does the person act? Does that individual hold on to well-established norms of behavior? And then lastly, whether the individual deserves 4 more years in office. So the challenger has an uphill battle, but there are a number of attack points that individual can have. In this case, Joe Biden running against Donald Trump. Now, one of the critical ingredients of this campaign and of our nation is the political divisions that are present in our society and in our political system. Certainly, we have a regional divide. If you look at the map of where the so-called red states are, or Republican-leaning states, certainly the plain states, the upper Midwest or Western states, and the solid South are generally the areas that Donald Trump has carved out and is expecting to win come November 3rd. With respect to the blue states, they clearly are the West Coast and the East Coast, and some of the industrial Midwest, which would be Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, although those are not certain as well. I mean, nothing is certain in this election, but the 2 coasts, including New England, and then some of that industrial heartland, are often considered to be the strength of the Democratic Party. Next is the differences between male and female. Clearly, data that is fairly consistent is that males seem to be more supportive of the Republican side and Donald Trump, and females seem to be more supportive of the Democrats and Joe Biden. I don't want to make a gross generalization here, because you see females supporting Donald Trump, you see males supporting Joe Biden, but the breakdown has been, in the last couple of elections, been moving in the direction of females supporting a Democratic candidate and males supporting a Republican candidate. Thirdly is the rural, urban, and suburban divide. This is the area that Donald Trump did very, very well in 2016, getting a sizable amount of that rural vote throughout the country. The urban vote and the minority vote associated with urban life has consistently gone to the Democratic side, and it likely will go to a large extent to Joe Biden. But it's the suburban vote that many people say is not only up for grabs, but will be a critical ingredient. All those suburbs that encircle a major urban center are currently moving in the direction of Joe Biden, but not in a dramatic way. But certainly, it appears that the suburban vote is one for Joe Biden to lose, if I can use that terminology. Ideology, conservative versus liberal. Americans have, I think, been a little bit right of center, not extreme right, but certainly are conservative in general, as opposed to being liberal in general. And so that will be an ingredient in people's choice. Do they feel that Joe Biden is too liberal, as the Trump campaign has been trying to portray him, or is President Trump an extreme right-wing candidate with support from individuals who are white supremacists, let's say, or some of these fringe groups? We'll just have to see how that plays out. Education level is kind of an interesting one here, and that is in the 2016 campaign, Donald Trump said, "I love the low educated." You don't like to hear that language because all of us are educated in some respects and don't make a decision about people based on their education. But there's been enough data now that the Donald Trump's base and a good deal of his support come from people who do not have a college education at any level or any kind of advanced degree. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well. Lastly is race, and that is how will the African American vote go? How will the Hispanic vote go? Right now, it appears the African American vote is, as it has in the past, tilting towards Biden. The Hispanic vote is kind of up for grabs right now. Some have said that Trump could make major inroads in that area. Also, Asian vote is growing and it tends towards the liberal Democratic side, and you know, those are the major ingredients here when we talk about racial participation. Okay, let me grab my water here for a minute, and let's move on then to some of the other issues, controversial issues that are going to be part of this 2020 election. Certainly one that's at the very top of the list is the mail-in voting in the United States Postal Service and the ability of town clerks and state secretaries of state being able to ensure that all the votes will be counted, all the votes will be accurate, all the votes will be ready to be counted so that we can make a decision on, so we can find out what the decision is, probably not on November 3rd, but certainly in a timely manner. I think most of you may have seen that Donald Trump is not a supporter of mail-in voting and sees it as a fraud, although there is hardly any evidence that mail-in voting is associated with some kind of fraud. But nevertheless, millions and millions of Americans are engaging in this process of mailing in their ballot. The question is, to what extent will these votes be accurate? Will they be validated? And will they be able to be counted in a timely fashion? Then there's also the issue of what is often called voter suppression. And that is, how do political officials in X, Y, or Z state make it difficult for people to vote? By not having that many polling centers, by stripping people off the voting rolls, and by making it difficult for people to register. There's been a claim by Democrats, certainly in this election and others, that the Republican governors in some states have made it difficult for African Americans to vote, and felons to vote, or felons who have done their time, so to speak. And so there is evidence that this has occurred, and the question then becomes, to what extent will people have an opportunity to vote without restriction if they indeed are eligible to vote. Thirdly is the role of the media, and more discussion is, are we getting the truth from the television media, from the news media, from social platforms? To what extent are these centers of information accurate, and to what extent are outside forces engaging in misinformation and disinformation? The Russians in particular, which there is clear evidence that they did so in 2016 and likely will do so today, this election as well. So the question is, to what extent is there bias? To what extent is there an opportunity for people to find the truth in terms of what candidates are saying and doing? Then the whole issue of truth-telling and tweets by our president. I don't want to just make this a Trump view, but the question then has come out to what extent are candidates accurately representing their position, accurately telling the American people straight up what they believe, or is there examples of gross untruthfulness on the part of these candidates? It's often been pushed on to Donald Trump, but we have to be fair and take a look at not only Joe Biden, but people running for Senate, people running for the House, people running for governor. Then there are the books there by Bob Woodward and Cohen, who was the lawyer for Donald Trump. They come out recently, and Mary Trump as well, the president's niece. All of those casting a negative light on Donald Trump at the present time. To what extent is that going to have an impact? Will people read it? Will people ignore it? Will people believe it? And so we'll have to determine the impact of these books on the voting public. Many people say is that voters have already made up their mind, and that these books are just kind of there to make some money rather than to shift votes. We'll have to see. Certainly the urban violence, if it continues right now, it's been kind of downplayed as a result in Portland because of the wildfires there. But certainly there have been examples in Louisville and Detroit and Wisconsin and other places where this kind of violence may have an impact on how people vote, seeing it as a threat to their own safety. Gun purchases are way up in this country. And that is an ingredient that can't be ignored. Also, the issue of white supremacy versus these Antifa groups, anti-fascist groups, white supremacists, and these Antifa groups clashing and presenting their points of view in a way that I think is troublesome to both people on the left and right and to all Americans. We'll have to see to what extent that plays out here as well. So those are some of the other issues that are part of the election of 2020. We want to move on to polling data, which is obviously something that is often a critical ingredient in the election. And we know that in 2016, many of the polling organizations did not get it right. In fact, one polling organization, the Rasmussen Group, which leans towards the Republican side, did get it right. And this group continues to emphasize the fact that all these other major polling organizations got it wrong and called it for Hillary Clinton when that was not the case. So right now, what we're seeing is a tremendous number of polls that are out there. Some of them are one-on-one, how Trump is doing versus Biden. There does appear to be a 5 to 7% average lead by Joe Biden at this time. Again, it's still over a number of six to 7 weeks before we get there. But the point is, at this point, on a one-to-one basis, Joe Biden is ahead. In the battleground states, which really matter, the Pennsylvania, Michigan, Florida, Ohio, perhaps Wisconsin and Minnesota as well, how those states will vote. Right now, again, in almost all of them, Joe Biden is ahead, but by very, very small margins, 2 to 3 to 4%, some cases a little bit more. But those are the states that really matter. You're not going to see President Trump or Joe Biden visit Vermont or North Dakota. Not that there's anything wrong with the people and the voters of those states, but certainly the states that really matter right now. Increasingly, Florida becoming important, and Pennsylvania and perhaps Wisconsin are critical states. Thirdly, we have the so-called silent Trump voters. Many people in the Trump administration have said this, is that there's a lot of people who don't answer public opinion polls or lie on them. Not that this is a terrible thing on their part, but the point is that we feel, I mean, it's possible that individuals are not participating in polls and not giving an accurate count of how they are going to vote, and just may go into the silence and the anonymity of the voting booth or from their kitchen table, send in that mail-in ballot and vote for Donald Trump in a way that is not shown up in the public opinion polls. There also is a lack of enthusiasm for Joe Biden. He doesn't appear to get a great deal of strong emotional support from his people. So that is also an issue which it doesn't really show up in the polls as much, although there is some of that. Whenever there is a polling of that, it's not something that Joe Biden, I think, would be happy to see. Lastly, and I mentioned this earlier, it appears that many voters have made up their mind already. And even though there are daily and regular polls going on, the fact is that many Americans probably have made up their mind. There would have to be a major shift in a particular issue or something unforetold. But even then, if they've mailed in their ballots, which in some states have already started, it is something that may not be able to be changed by spending millions and millions of dollars on television ads or even moving from state to state. Now, I think you know that there are 3 presidential debates and 1 vice presidential debate. The debates will become, I believe, important as we move forward here in the coming weeks. The first debate is on the 29th of September, then the 2 others are in October. It will depend on how Trump and Biden perform, so to speak, in this debates and how they handle themselves and whether they're able to make a case that Trump should be reelected or Biden should replace him. Question is, do debates matter? We'll have to see, depending again on the performance. And as I mentioned, many people have made up their minds. Debates don't normally change people's minds that much, but who knows? We'll have to see. Underlying the message of each of these candidates as we go forward is their value position. What do they stand for? What do they hope to bring to America? And so we have these conflicts that are going on, value conflicts. Should we emphasize the role of the public sector, government? Should we emphasize the role of the private sector? What kind of proper balance should there be between public and private? What about science and expertise? Should we be listening to the scientists and Dr. Fauci and others, or should we perhaps not pay that much attention to their views and their visions of what could happen with COVID or with hurricanes or any kind of natural disasters? Thirdly is this individualism versus community spirit. Americans are often highly individualistic, freedom first, as we see with the mask issue. But the question then becomes, to what extent do Americans embrace what is often called a community spirit, willing to work together towards a common goal, whatever that might be, in this case, trying to stop the spread of the COVID. We're seeing a good deal of, with regard to this individual versus community spirit, we're seeing a lot of me first arguments. Again, I'm not making a judgment against that. It's part of this whole individualistic freedom point of view. But there is a question about empathy. Are we concerned about others? Do we hope to create a situation where we work together and recognize the fact that we have to be concerned about each other? Then there are the questions of norms, presidential norms and government norms, ways that we've often done things. Again, we see the first time a president has used tweets as a way of getting his message across. Again, nothing wrong with that. We're in the age of social media platforms, but the question is, how are candidates getting their message across? Are they doing things in a way that's unusual? And many people would say that Donald Trump is breaking a number of these well-established norms. Others are saying that's a good thing that he did. So that's up for the voters to determine that. The last two is, do we trust government and do we trust the elites that not only run government, but are in the business and academic and Wall Street sector? Should we trust government? Government is not very trustworthy in terms of public opinion polls. And there does appear to be this gap between how Americans view average, ordinary, Main Street Americans versus the coastal elites, as they are often called. Who do we trust? Who would we believe? Who should we be putting our support in terms of running our country in the future years? Now, before I wrap this up, I want to talk a little bit about some post-election scenarios. And they're not good in terms of stability and consensus and lack of chaos. We all know that November 3rd is the election. Many people, and I think accurately show that we might not find out who would be the president until maybe the 5th or 6th or 7th or even longer. We'll get to that in a second. There certainly will be legal challenges by both sides in terms of the vote count, in terms of the ballot count, in terms of the ability of the ballots to be accurately legitimized. And so we're going to see legal challenges like we've never seen before. Joe Biden has said he has an army of lawyers now prepared, and I presume that Donald Trump has the same thing. What's kind of interesting is that political pundits are of the opinion that because of the slow manner in which votes will be counted, because of the mail-in votes, that it's quite possible that one of the two candidates will declare early that he won. Some say this would be Donald Trump's strategy, that on the 4th or 5th or maybe even late in the morning of the 4th, after the election is allegedly over, Donald Trump will show that he is ahead when Joe Biden may be waiting for 3, 4, 5 days until all of the mail-in votes come from across the country. Again, we'll just have to see that. And then, of course, the question then becomes who concedes to the victor. And again, concessions are usually an important part of finishing off this election process. It doesn't look like people are going to concede, excuse me, very, very early in, because they'll be waiting for 3 or 4 or 5 days down the road until everything is in. So none of this watching the election and staying up to 1, 2 in the morning. People can do it, but they're likely not going to be satisfied with the conclusion of this election. Now, let me give you some key dates here, because this is critical. On December 8th, the states must certify the vote in their state, which would then lead to the 14th of December, in which electors will be chosen by the victor. If it's Donald Trump, it'll be Republican or pro-Trump electors. Biden, the opposite. And then the votes are counted by in Congress on January 6th, and then on January 20th is the inauguration. But there's some problems here, and I don't want to go too deeply in this because it gives you a headache, but there's something called the Electoral Count Act of 1887. This came in the result of the Tilden-Hayes election of 1876, when Tilden got the popular vote and Hayes got the electoral vote. What happened a number of years afterwards is that there was a very ambiguous law written called the Electoral Count Act that stated that there has to be a victor named by December 14th. December 14th. That's often called a safe harbor. In other words, votes can come in and be counted up until December 14th. The question is, what happens if we don't have all the votes in by December 14th? And how are we going to determine who the electors are at that time? And it becomes really very, very dicey as a result of this. What happens also if we have a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor? The Republican legislature may determine that they should have electors from the Republican side or the Trump side. The Democratic governor would do differently with Democratic electors. In fact, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are examples of that, of a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor. So there becomes a problem here as we head forward. There could be two groups of electors. There could be further delays. There could be Supreme Court action. There could be chaos in terms of determining who will who will be able to be named as the President of the United States. Just to give you one other thing, if we get to January 20th and no one has been named as the legally recognized President of the United States, Nancy Pelosi becomes the President of the United States. Yes, I said that, Nancy Pelosi, the President of the United States, if no one is declared the victor by January 20th. So keep that in mind. Okay, we'll leave that at that because that's something for you to scratch your head at and maybe make a determination of how that's going to work out. I want to leave you with a couple of key questions here as we wrap this up, and Rob is going to take over for me. As we move forward here with this discussion, and also as you think this through for yourselves, I'd like you to think about, will the United States be able to overcome all of these domestic, international, and political challenges? Does it have the capability under our current governing system to deal with that? Some have said the United States is in a period of decline as a result of these governing problems and the great divisions in our country. Is that the case, or will we be able to rebound and get back in the game here? And lastly, can anyone bring this nation together and create a united nation rather than a divided nation? Is that possible? And how long will it take? So again, an important election, one that I hope all of you are going to participate in, and one that I think will go down certainly as one of the most important in our history. So I'm open now through Rob to answer any questions, and I think my email address will be given to you as well, so I'd be happy to respond in that way. So Rob, take it over.
Thanks, Mike. And that was really very well done. I mean, for a 40+ minute presentation to cram that much stuff in there very clearly and concisely, I think you did a great job. Lots of stuff to cover, lots of stuff to talk about. So we've had a bunch of questions already coming in, so we'll just get right to it. So Marianne asked if the number of articles and books written about Donald Trump is unusual for an incumbent president, or if you have any sense of that.
The incumbent what? I'm sorry, Rob, the what?
The incumbent president. Is it unusual for so many articles and books to be focused on the incumbent?
Again, a good number of these books are books associated with the president's personal life, the president's psychological background, the president's behavior in office. And again, I'm not making a judgment about that, but many of the books that have been written are associated not necessarily with public policy concerns, but are deal with the individual and his performance in office and the way he has kind of dismantled some of the traditional norms of presidential politics and presidential governance. So the answer is that quite often we don't see that kind of analysis until after the individual has left. I mean, books about Clinton, but after he has left, or Jimmy Carter, or George W. Bush, that kind of thing. But right now we're getting books right during the electoral season. In fact, in the last 3 or 4 months here, we've seen books that zero in on the president and not only his performance, but his mental acuity, I guess you could say.
Yeah. No, it is really amazing to see just how much coverage he gets. I work with a group that looks at actually news articles, and they said that the coverage of Trump and Biden is about the same as you would normally expect in an election, but usually we don't have a pandemic. So it's surprising that there's this much coverage given the pandemic and the wildfires and things like that. So just on top of the books in addition. So Stella asks if you have any thoughts on Trump's threat to send in deputies and sheriffs to polling places. And she mentioned that they're supposed to be unarmed as far as she understands.
Yeah, I think that this is what has disturbed a number of people is the president and some people in the Department of Homeland Security suggesting that there should be not only a police presence, but perhaps some kind of military presence at polling booths. The only reason you do that is you see this in South American countries. They're designed to intimidate people as they vote. The Department of Homeland Security said they had no authorization to do this. And I think most of you who vote in their town or their city know there's always a policeman there just to make sure that everybody is actively doing what they're supposed to do in terms of standing in line and not creating a commotion. But when you start talking about factors that might be viewed as intimidation, it becomes worrisome. And this is all part of what is often described as suppression. I'm more concerned about the number of polling centers. Wisconsin had a primary as example, and for the whole city of Milwaukee, they had 5 or 6 polling centers, which is unconscionable in terms of giving people an opportunity to go a block from their home or 2 blocks rather than take a bus or a drive somewhere. And also stripping people of some off the rolls if they haven't voted in the last election. You know, those kinds of things are troublesome. So I understand what the questioner is asking, but there's more, I guess you'd say, more serious signs of suppression rather than the so-called military intimidation or police intimidation.
As a follow-up to that, I'm curious about voter turnout in general, because obviously if you can suppress a particular group, if you can identify this group of people will vote against me, I'll suppress them. Is there any value from either side just in suppressing the vote in general, or like just having less turnout? You know, I'm thinking maybe that's something that would benefit Trump, but I don't know why necessarily, or is that not the case? Do both?
It appears that, again, I'm not here to make a definitive statement against Republican governors, but there's a concern within the Trump camp about the African American vote, and if you have and the Hispanic vote, if you cut down the number of voting places or voting centers, then it makes it difficult for people to vote. They're not going to stand in line for 2, 3, 4 hours, and so they may go home, or they may not go because they know that's going to be a pain in the you know what to do that. So I think when you start to cut back on the number of voting centers, in particularly in urban cities, that becomes an advantage to the Republican Party, because urban residents have usually voted for the Democratic side.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so Colleen asks, she says that mudslinging is always part of the candidate's advertising or positioning at some point, but does it feel like it started early this year? Like, did it start right out of the gate? Is that normal? And she also just adds that she finds the accusations implied put forth on behalf of both candidates to be particularly disturbing, and wonders if you have similar thoughts.
I agree. One cannot point up one candidate, Trump or Biden, in terms of being angels in terms of the way their ads are presented. What's kind of interesting, though, there's a group called the Lincoln Group, which is the never Trumpers or Trump Republicans for Biden, and they've come out with some, I'm not saying great ads, but some really negative ads that have gotten Donald Trump very, very upset, because these are people who should be Trump supporters, and they are indeed working very, very diligently through their ads, which are negative ads, which are tough ads, to get people to swing over to Biden. But yes, and it's only going to get even worse, not only in terms of the ads, but in terms of the both candidates criticizing each other or slandering each other. It's part of what we are as a nation. It's not unusual, but I think it's going to intensify in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Yeah. So we have 3 more questions that are put up here. We're right at time. I know, Mike, you said you could go a few minutes over, but for anybody who has to leave now, we're recording this, so you can always go back and hear the answers to these. And then if we run out of time, as Mike offered very generously to respond via email to any questions. So the next one comes from Janine, and she asks if you can explain the relationship between individual ballots cast versus the Electoral College, and how you think that might affect the delay of the declaration of the victor, and does it make a difference if, quote unquote, all the votes have been received?
Well, yeah, the votes have to be certified, as I mentioned, by early December. In other words, the Secretary of State will say this is the vote total for Massachusetts, and that let's just say that it's Joe Biden gets one more vote than Donald Trump in Massachusetts, and it's certified that number. Well, then what that means is that the Democratic Party and the Biden people can put together a slate of electors that matches our 2 senators and our representatives, and so that those electors then would be able to cast their ballot on the 14th of December, and that ballot decision, that vote would then go to the United States Congress in January. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but the point being here is that when we talk about the vote certification, that's not only to say who won and who lost, but who has the right to name the electors. We are usually party people or supporters of the candidate in X, Y, or Z state.
Gotcha.
Do you think that is that okay? I think that's what she was asking him.
Yeah, no, I think that does get to the heart of the matter of like how that's going to affect. So it's more the timing of when they can be certified and basically. So Kathleen asks, well, she said she's very concerned about the amount of money spent on elections, and then asked, does it seem to increase every year? And I guess as an add-on or ancillary to that is, what do the numbers look like so far this campaign season? Well,
Biden's had a very good couple of months here, raising hundreds of millions of dollars. Trump and the Republicans have raised hundreds of millions of dollars as well, but Biden seems to be leading the money race at the present time, because what that money is used for is not only to hire campaign workers, but mostly it's social media buys, television buys, that kind of thing. And which are very, very costly if you're going to go to 50 states, although most of those buys are going to be in those battleground states. So right now, Biden is leading the way. Trump has said that he would put some of his own money in, which is kind of unusual at this stage, that it would appear that the Trump campaign and the Republicans are not doing as well in terms of raising money, although they historically have had major donors give millions and millions of their own dollars.
Gotcha. Yeah, there is just more and more money all the time, it seems like. So, yeah. We have a couple more. Brian asks, what the best way, if you have any thoughts on the best way to avoid possible violence that could occur after the presidential election results, and maybe your thoughts on what that looks like. I know you talked about the tension, but if you have a sense or a belief if there may or may not be violence.
Well, in that interim period from November 3rd to January 20th, if there's an unresolved a presidential victor, one would hope that both candidates, Biden and Trump, would go to the airways and tell people to calm down and relax and not engage in any kind of activity that would be considered detrimental to trying to create some level of, I don't want to say consensus, but some level of acceptance of the results. It didn't help the other day when an official of Health and Human Services stated that people should get ready to buy guns and go out in the streets if Trump is not elected. He just today dropped back from that statement. But, and again, I'm not, pointing only to Trump people, because you may see the same thing with the Antifa group that is supportive of Joe Biden and others. But it would take both of the candidates and their campaigns and their vice presidents to tell the American people, just wait until we get a final result here and accept the victor and not engage in any kind of activity. That's hopefully would be the case. Yeah,
I think we all hope for that. So, hopefully everybody can sit tight and wait for all the votes to be counted. So from Janet, a little more on the Electoral College. Are there any states that are allowed to split their votes based on the results of the election, or is it all or nothing for every state?
Well, both in Maine and Nebraska, they can split their vote based on U.S. representative districts. Maine is an example close to us where it could be that one of the representative districts, it's a second district, could go for Trump, where the other two districts could likely go for Biden. There would be a split there. Same thing in Nebraska. It's highly unusual, but that's a result of the way Maine and Nebraska want to choose their electors in a campaign in the election. But what I mentioned earlier is that this kind of doomsday scenario is that what happens if there's no decision by an X state, let's just say Pennsylvania, which has a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature. You could have, I hope that's not the case, you could have the Republican legislature name their electors pro-Trump, the governor coming forward and naming a slate of electors that are pro-Biden. There are a couple of other states like that. You hope it doesn't get that way, because that creates a huge constitutional mess that likely would have to go to the Supreme Court, and we could be back in the United States, the 2000 election, where you had hanging chads and the Supreme Court eventually not declaring Bush the victor, but putting it in the works that he would win. Right.
So that maybe that's the most likely President Nancy Pelosi scenario, is if we have the electors are basically split between who's running each. Okay, and so I think a last question to end on, unless I see any others that come in. Can you have any thoughts on the upcoming debate at the end of this month?
And the what? I'm sorry, the debate?
The upcoming debate. What are your thoughts on the next debate?
Well, as I say, the first one is the 29th, and then there's two in October, and then also one vice presidential debate. A lot of it will be how people perceive the two candidates in terms of not only how they handle the questions, but how they interact with each other, whether there's any kind of misstatements made, or clearly errors in the way they present an argument. I think the Trump people are hoping that Joe Biden will flub some of his responses, and then there are those who say that Donald Trump will engage in some falsehoods in his. On either side, there are some opportunities for a problem with regard to the debates, and you hope that they're dignified. You hope that they stick to the issues and the public policy prescriptions. But sometimes I think you maybe want to be entertained by these two guys going after each other in kind of like a political fight during the debate. So we'll just have to see. Hopefully, it'll be an adult discussion.
We can only hope. I mean, that is I think the bar that we have to set is, can we just have a discussion? Well, Mike, really appreciate your overview, all your thoughts, all your responses, and I want to thank everybody for their great questions. This was
happy to do it. I guess we're going back to Alexis here now. Is that it, or what?
Yep. Now I'm going to flip it back to Alexis for some closing thoughts. Thanks, everybody.
Just once again, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Krazanik, for the excellent presentation, insightful thoughts. I hope everyone here got something out of it, and Rob, to you for your flawless facilitating of our question and answer once again. So thank you both so much. And I would just like to say our next 3 Aluminars, October, November, and December, are in the process of being finalized and will be released via email, social media, and our website within probably the next week or so. So everybody, please be on the lookout for those and make sure that you register. We have some great topics coming up. And we will be continuing our Aluminars post-pandemic. So this will be a long-term program that we do. So if anyone has any ideas for an interesting Aluminar topic, or if you yourself have some research that you think might be of interest to our alums, please let us know by emailing us. Also, if anyone has any feedback on today's presentation or would like to reach out directly to Mike, I will give you the 2 email addresses. You can reach out to us at alumni@bridgew.edu, or to Dr. Kryzanek at mkrazanek, KRYZANEK @bridgew.edu. And on behalf of the entire Alumni Relations Office, we thank you all for spending your afternoon with us today. And we wish you all continued good health and look forward to seeing you at future virtual and in-person events. Thank you again. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye. Good seeing you all.